Right.
Oh, we're going early.
Lousy house.
Yes, it is. But if you feel like, you know, looking at it, and there's just a couple of officers in the front row.
Back to answer.
Yes, yes. If you feel like walking off, Lord Rix. Is it not like this in the House of Lords there sometimes?
Often. Especially at 11:45 at night, 11:45 at night or something like that.
I should think so.
Literally, only the people...
The ones that are here are awake, I think.
Yeah.
Brian Rix, who via becoming Sir Brian is now, of course, Lord Rix, is one of the phenomena of 20th century British theatre, dominating the London theatre scene for over 25 years with one specific form of theatre with which his name is synonymous. Now, how did it all begin? How did you get into theatre? I mean, where did you come from?
Well, I come from the East Riding of Yorkshire. I was born in Cottingham and brought up in Hornsey. My father was one of three brothers who were ship owners and eventually oil importers as well. My father couldn't act for toffee, but my mother was mad keen on amateur theatre, amateur dramatics, concert parties, Savoyards, all the Gilbert and Sullivan, stuff like that. And she roped all the family in. My sister Sheila, who eventually became well known particularly in Yorkshire as Annie Sugden at Emmerdale Farm, and my brother Malcolm and my other sister Nora, who was a jolly good actress but never took it up. And we all became amateurs with my mother. I was the youngest in the family, so I was the stage manager. You know, I put the records on the panatrope, and I took the prompt copy and sat in the prompt corner, which in amateur theatre can be quite a daunting thing, especially for a youngish boy, you know. And then I was allowed on the stage in front of a grown-up audience. By now I was playing leading parts at school. And then, as I grew older, my mother used to put me into small parts in the plays, or the passion plays, or the concert. And but so I began to love being, the idea of being an actor. Mm-hmm. My father wanted me to go into the business, and the war was on, and he took me to experiment in the business, sitting opposite him at one of the old Victorian desks, the partner's desk. And there I learnt about demurrage and dry weights and bills of lading and ledgers and journals and day books. And in 3 weeks, I was so bored I can't tell you. I was 17.
And your desire to become an actor, or what?
No,
what about going to Oxford?
Well, what happened then was I was attested for aircrew, and I think I was just under 18, because I was given PNB, Pilot Navigator Bomber, but I was sent away on 10 months deferred service, and I didn't know what to do with 10 months deferred service, so I thought I'd like to become an actor. And it so happened that Wolfett was playing Hull, the new theatre Hull. My sister Sheila, who was 5 years older than me, the Emmerdale Farm sister, she'd been with Donald Wolfett from Stratford-on-Avon, and I got to know him. So he was playing Hull in a play called David Garrick by Constance Cox, and with Ros Iden playing his wife. And so I knocked on his dressing room door after the matinee, and I said, could I possibly join his company for the autumn? And I had 10 months deferred service. And he said, this is not a bad idea, and took me up onto the stage to do an audition piece. Well, of course, what he wanted was, oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I, ought to be or not to be, or something like that. And the only thing I knew was a poem I'd recited for my mother the previous Sunday at the Floral Hall in Hornsey, which was Bessie's Boyle by Robert Service, who is a Canadian poet. He was sort of Canadian poet laureate, really, but had been born in Lancashire. And he'd written this North Country poem when he was actually in Canada about the North Country, and it was called Bessie's Boyle, and that's all I knew. And I give you a little sample of it.
Oh, do.
It was, says to me, Missy, but gum, lass, there's something to see on the man, says she. You were right, Sam, I've summoned it happens. It's on me behind, it's a boil. I said, make Joe be jealous, it hurts me no end when I sit. Says, I go to hospital, Mrs. They might have to cut it a bit. Says she, I just hates to be showing the part of me person it's at. Says, don't be fussy. Then Dr. sees sights far more horrid than that. So Mrs. goes off, togged up tasty, there at the hospital door. She moves down, and I can't remember how it goes on after that.
But it was enough to impress Wolfit.
No, but except for the very end. And two guys, white coats, are looking at it from every point of view. And one says, here, missus, it was to be cut. Anyone could see that. You ought to be in the hospital where all the doctors is at. You see, missus, this part of the hospital is closed on account of repairs. Us fellas is only the painters are painting the halls and the stairs. And that's how I ended up with Wolfit in Hamlet and Twelfth Night, Midsummer Night's Dream, and his very, very first King Lear, which was
his
really
first
quite
Lear.
something. First Lear, which didn't go down too well. His second Lear, which he did at the King's Hammersmith, went down much better. But I was in his first Lear. And Harold Pinter was in his second Lear.
Right.
So it's all going back a long time.
It's certainly odd associating you with Donald Wolfit.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
on the other hand, am I right in thinking that it's perhaps the first time that any trousers fell down?
Well, it was, what happened was I was playing a schoolgirl matinee, and I was playing Snout in the Dream with the wall, and the wall was a big box around me, you know, with two little things to put my hands out for the chinks and so on and so forth. And I had a very large pair of tights, which really would have fitted Fred Emney, but you kept them up by twisting pennies and tying them off with bits of tape or string, and you kept them up that way. But I'd sort of spent my pennies because I was only on £3 a week.
Right.
Well, that's sort of quite, but I was only on £3 a week, and so I lifted up my wall to do some business with my fingers through the chinks, and my tights fell down. Well, I assisted them to fall down. And the ladies and the girls in the audience absolutely wet themselves. It was a great event to see that sort of thing happen. And afterwards, Wolfit ticked me off and said, no, you mustn't put in business like that, but kept it in. And from then on, I dropped my tights every single night. That was the very, very first time I did it. It was actually with Wolfit in Snout.
You didn't at that time, I imagine, that this was going to be such an important part of your life.
No, I didn't think it was going to become part of it. I wanted to play Hamlet, of course, you know, those days.
Right.
And then Wolfit then had to go on an Ensa tour because he had to do it to keep himself out of the forces. And we did 6 weeks of Twelfth Night, which we had played for 2 weeks in the St James's Theatre, London. Wow. And I played Sebastian opposite Ros Iden, looking absolutely so unlike a twin of Ros Iden. It was absurd. Anyway, and I wasn't very good anyway. And so I never forget that we went round all the camps with Twelfth Night. It didn't go down frightfully well with the troops. We then reached the first American troops to be over here, who were at Tidworth. And we were there for 5 nights. First night, curtain goes up on Twelfth Night, and within 2 minutes, everybody had left the theatre, except for the front row of officers who had to sort of stick it out for a bit. But the rest of the audience, very noisily, with American expletives, had disappeared out of the auditorium. And Wolfit was absolutely furious. And he went and complained to the colonel after it was all over. And the colonel said, we'll fix that up tomorrow. And all this went up. And next night, the place was packed again. And the curtain goes up to a dead silence. The whole of Twelfth Night played to absolute dead silence. The audience never rustle, never cough, never laugh, never blow their noses, never do anything. Just dead silence till the end of the first half, or the first act. Curtain comes down, and we think, what the hell is going on? And we look through the curtains, and there, walking up and down the aisles, are the military police with their guns out of their holsters. And that's how he literally played for 4 more nights to that captive audience. It was absolutely, it was silent, but they were dragooned in there, and that's the way they were kept. Anyway, my deferment was increased.
Were they trying to keep you out?
They tried to keep me out. I mean, I didn't say anything to anybody. I suddenly got a letter to say, it's been increased for another, maybe up to 12 months. So I went to Donald, and very unpopular I was with saying that I wanted to get some rep experience. And I went to, and so eventually I went, and I auditioned, and I don't think I auditioned, I think I just was interviewed at the White Rose Players at Harrogate, which was one of the top reps in those days. Trevor Howard had come from there. John Whiting, the author, was going to join us later on. He was demobbed from the army for ill health. And I went there and played everything, you know, from a Chinese servant in the letter on my first appearance. It took me about an hour and a half to make up with soaping up my eyebrows and all the rest of it. And then, but I played Danny in Night Must Fall. I played John Shand in What Every Woman Knows, you know. I played vast and far too many parts with 7 and 20 on, you know, to draw the lines to play 40-year-olds. And there I was, an 18-year-old, trying to look, you know, that sort of middle-aged man. Experience, though, was fantastic. So having Shakespeare, and then off I went to the Air Force.
I was going to say, eventually the Air Force got you, did it?
Eventually.
How long did you spend at the Air Force?
Well, because I'd been deferred, I had to stay in longer.
Right.
By the time I came out, it was 1947.
Oh.
And I'd had a marvellous, for a short time, I'd gone down the mines as well.
Oh.
Because, well, what happened was aircrew, after the war with Germany, they stopped training aircrew unless you signed on for another 3 years. And I wouldn't sign on for 3 years, obviously, although I did serve for nearly another 2 years. And they offered you alternative employment. They offered you parachutes, paratrooper, glider pilot, ACHGD, aircraft hand general duties, which meant you cleaned the cookhouse and you cleaned the other house and you cleaned, you know, anything that was going. It was a lousy job. Or to go down the mines, and I went down the mines. And I went to Ascot Main Colliery in Yorkshire, near Doncaster, and I did my stint there. And then that finished, and I still had to finish my Air Force service. So I went on a course to learn about how to instruct nursing orderlies. And for a year, I had 3 WAF courses, which was rather pleasant. Where I instructed them. I ran the Station Dramatic Society, and I captained the station cricket team. So I had a fantastic last year, as you can well imagine. And then I came out in October '47, when I was 23. And I thought, well, you know, Dickie Attenborough had been out a year, was back in very good work. Jack Watling had been out. Geoffrey Hibbard had been out. They'd all been out and got the decent jobs. And I'd been fired by enthusiasm of seeing Wolfett run his own company, and also the fact that I was from a business family. So I borrowed some money from my father and one of my uncles, and I became an actor manager with £1,000.
At the ridiculously young age of 23?
Yeah. And I hadn't got a theatre, of course.
No.
I hadn't got a company. But I had a letterhead, and I had an office over a chemist shop, in an attic over a chemist shop.
This was still up in Yorkshire?
Oh, Newbegin in Hornsey. But I couldn't send it from home. It looked official if I put 53 Newbegin and Hornsey Yorks, etc., you know. And so I wrote to every theatre I could think of to say I had the best repertory company you could imagine. Of course, I hadn't got a company at all. And eventually I went, Ilkley, believe me, and the King's Hall, Ilkley, which was pretty desperate, because they'd only done split weeks, you know, 3 nights of a tour, 3 nights of a tour before the war. they'd ever reached anything more than that. And frankly, that's all they could ever do when we went there. And I went down to London, and I got together a cast.
How did you do that? Because you didn't really know people. You weren't in part of the theatrical scene, were you?
No. I got to know an agent called Gordon Harbord.
Right.
And Gordon sent along a lot of lousy actors or good actors. Oh, no, I had done one other thing, of course. I had actually got a bit more knowledge, because when the war was over, a reunion theatre got together, which was Young People's Theatre, which was run by people like Nigel Patrick and people like that.
Right.
And they organised auditions for actors coming out of the services. And I had done a 3-day, rehearsed for 3 days. What they did was short excerpts from plays. And they did the Duke of York's Theatre, and you did 10 minutes excerpt, and all the managers and the agents were sitting in front.
Right.
And so that's how I got to know Gordon. And I, of course, was still in the Air Force.
So there was quite a, I suppose, because so many people were coming out of the army who had or would have been in the profession, it was a rather particular time, I suppose.
Oh, it was fantastic. It was 1946. 1946, year after the war.
So having got your as it were, your date at Ilkley, you go down to London to now assemble this non-existent at the time
That's
company.
right. I bring together a load of actors, audition them, etc., and I go back, rehearse. I spend £1,000 on new lighting, new second-hand furniture, and all the rest of it, you know, for the rep, and Hessian covers to change the look of the, because that's all you get was Hessian. And we opened with a play called Nothing But the Truth, which was again where I realized I could get laughs playing the bloke who's told it for 24 hours he has to tell the truth as a bet, you know. And on the very first night, I was a disaster struck, because we checked everything. It was the King's Hall was about 60 years, 100 years old, and we checked everything except the ropes, the lines, which held onto the tabs. The tabs were the old-fashioned ones that swagged up to each side of the proscenium arch. And the curtain went up on the first night with a place full of comps. All the council were there with all their friends, etc., not having paid a bloody penny. And the curtain went up, and immediately the curtain on the right-hand side, the rope parted, the line parted, because it was rotten and old, and the curtain came down. And there were 3 actors in the centre of the stage, and around a desk, stockbroker's office. And they realised they couldn't be seen by this part of the audience. So instead of, if you'd been an experienced company like you are, you know, yours, you'd have blacked out, you'd have repaired the damage, and you'd apologised and started again. But we didn't. We panicked. The stage director ran into the flies and started to lower a rope. A stagehand walked on and said, "Well, go on, Colin, just lower the rope just a bit more this way," and all this was going on. And the 3 actors pushed the desk over to the left-hand side of the stage so they could be seen by the entire audience.
Did they carry on playing the scene?
Playing the play. I mean, it was madness. I had to come on from down left to the door that opened on stage. Yeah. And of course I couldn't get on stage because the door was trapped by the desk which they'd pushed up against it. So I panicked as well. And I walked round to the back of the set and I climbed in through a window and got a big laugh, of course.
There is this drive that whatever happens, the play must go on. We must not
It was
stop.
our first ever night. And I climbed in, got a big laugh, and a round of applause, really, because the play was Nothing But the Truth, which, as you know, is an American farce, and the play takes place, the first act, in a New York skyscraper 43 floors up.
But you always remember the times things went wrong when you go to the
theatre. It's an utter disaster.
But clearly, with your tights falling down while playing for Wolfit and having to climb in through windows, you're being your learning misled perhaps into thinking how you get laughs, which has clearly affected the whole of your life?
Yes, it has really. I mean, truthfully, I could get laughs. Yeah. And I could get laughs because I got good timing. Yeah. I was a good cricketer.
Yes, yes.
And timing in cricket is everything.
Now this, of course, is what your father would have liked you to have done, something. Took Oxford, cricket blue, back into the business.
That's what my father was.
And now you're crawling around on stages, dropping trousers, making people laugh.
Right, yeah.
It's a sad story. But then, so you did this at the Ilkley, and you moved around to other places with your company?
Well, no, what happened? Ilkley was a disaster.
Oh, right.
You can well imagine. I mean, the productions were good and the sets were good, but the audience was non-existent, really. And at the end of 28 weeks...
Why was it non-existent? I mean, there was no television to watch.
No, it was a very small...
small places?
Yeah, there was no television then. Only just a few people in London had television.
Yes. So why weren't they flocking to your theatre?
Because they didn't go to the theatre in Ilkley. That's why they had split weeks before the before the war.
It's too small, perhaps, as a place.
And so I mean, we struggled along, but we lost money. And so I wrote round again.
You lost your money?
Yes,
or your father's?
My father and uncle's money, truthfully. And the bank managers as well, because we had a bit of an overdraft. So I wasn't very popular either at home or with my uncle or with the bank manager. Anyway, in the middle of the Theatre Managers magazine every month, the centre pages had all the plays and the agents which were released for repertory. Mm-hmm. And underneath was a title which I thought was quite enticing, called Reluctant Heroes. So I sent off Reluctant Heroes, a reading copy, and it arrived back, a rather tatty copy. And I sat and read it in between the evening and the matinee and the evening show of the Saturday. Mm-hmm. And I fell about with laughter, and I thought, this is the play I want to do. And I put it on in the rep, and it got a huge reaction because everybody had either been in the services or everybody was being called up, because a service farce about call-up. Mm-hmm. He'd written originally about the war, and the people had been the Germans, but that was rewritten after the war.
Had it been done at all at this stage?
Oh, yeah.
Reluctant Heroes?
About 3 or 4 managements that had options on it, including Peter Saunders.
And had put it on or had not?
No, well, they tried it out. Penge and
places
like that. And,
but it hadn't caught on?
It hadn't caught on. Or they'd all been frightened that it was and I was determined to put it on. But in the meantime, by the way, I've started another rep in Margate.
Busy man.
And I'd gone down to Margate to open it with a hasty heart, where I played the American. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. So I could remember all the books of the Old Testament, which I had to know as the American soldier. And anyway, I'd auditioned for the company going down to Margate, and into the room at into the audition room, which was a tiny office at a club up in Dean Street. Walked this gorgeous creature in a green costume, which was Elspeth. And I immediately fell for Elspeth and persuaded her not to go to Margate, but to go to Bridlington, because I was going back to Bridlington after I'd opened Margate. And so I opened Margate, and it was so fine. And I went back to Bridlington, and I asked Elspeth to come to the Young Farmers' Ball with me 2 nights later. She was an ASM then, and she came to, and I proposed to her 2 nights later. Of course, I didn't get a positive answer. I got a laugh, really. And
that was all right.
She was 19, just 19, and she'd already done Edward My Son, playing the bride in Edward My Son for Robert Morley, and she'd been a rank starlet for a year.
Why was she at Bridlington as an ASM?
Well, because they wrapped up all the rank charm school, finished.
Oh, I see.
And she was looking for other work. I mean, she'd done 3 B films with David Tomlinson and people like that.
So she was way ahead of you.
We were way ahead. And she was earning £15 a week, and I was earning 12, you know?
So you were now endeavouring to run a theatre in Bridlington and Margate.
Yes,
you were going to run two places and act in.
No, I had a good manager in Margate, and I had my sister in Margate too.
Oh, right.
So there was a Rix there and a Rix there.
Yes.
And,
so you were back at Bridlington with Elspeth.
Elspeth. And I then got the idea that I'd like to go to the Whitehall Theatre because I heard the Worm's Eye View, which had been running there for 4 years, was coming off and transferring to the Comedy Theatre because H.J. Barlow, who put the play on, was a nuts and bolts manufacturer in Wolverhampton, actually. But he decided to become an impresario as well. He put on Worm's Eye View, which was Deltafield, of course.
Yes.
And he fell out with the manager of the theatre and said, I'm taking and he took it to the Comedy. I got to know it was coming off, so I wrote, of course, straight away. And they wrote back and said, very sorry, we're taking a thing called The Dish Ran Away with Betty Paul and Frank Lawton. Betty Paul was French and a singer, really. And it got the worst notices of any play that I've ever read in my entire theatrical life. It was crucified from top to bottom by every single agent, critic. And so they came back to me and they said, would you like to come to the Whitehall? And I said, of course. I said, yes, because The Dish Ran Away. It was going to come off very quickly. And they said, we'll send our manager, Vincent Lawson, to see it. Will you come and collect him? So Elspeth and I drove down with our big, great golden Labrador, which I'd given Elspeth for Christmas.
You were married now?
Married. We were married after 6 months.
Excellent.
I didn't have long to wait after the first proposal. So,
where were you playing? So Reluctant Heroes was on now with Patch back in it.
Where was it? Well, we were playing Theatre Royal Nottingham on this particular week.
Right.
And which back to those days onto the Empire, because the Empire's been pulled down now. Mm-hmm. But it was the Theatre Royal. And Elspeth and I went down in my standard Vanguard, which was a hideous sort of tortoise.
I remember them, yes.
Yeah. And drove down there with the Labrador in the back. And Vincent Lawson sat in the front. We were coming back from the Whitehall to the Theatre Royal Nottingham. And there I am driving along, no motorways or anything like that. And I get to a roundabout, and I think, this isn't Nottingham, and it's Leicester. I've driven to Leicester. And there's a motorcycle cop on the roundabout. And I stop and I say, excuse me, am I in Nottingham? He said, no, you're in Leicester. And I said, well, I've got to get to matinee at 5 o'clock at the Theatre Royal Nottingham. He said, follow me. I mean, it's incredible, isn't it? He went round the roundabout, and we went round and followed, and he took me right through to the stage door.
Police escort.
Of the Theatre Royal, which was fantastic of him. Mm-hmm. And Elspeth and I, both in the show, arrived about 5 minutes before the curtain went up, with everybody sweating away with fear. And Vincent Lawson came in, and of course nobody was watching the show. I mean, we hadn't got any big names, and it was a matinee in Nottingham. He sat in the front row, and he just fell about with laughter. Came round afterwards and said, it's fantastic. And we fixed up the deal there and then. I mean, it was quite extraordinary. And the deal was an unbreakable deal. As long as I stayed in the show and put on the shows, they couldn't kick me out of the theatre.
Of the Whitehall?
Of the Whitehall.
So that really got your foot in there forever. And all this time you were having your problems with Reluctant Hero and losing Wally Patch and touring. You believed you were sitting on something special?
Oh, yes, I did. So I mean, you've only got to listen to the audience. I mean, the curtain went up to a laugh. Now, how many shows do that? Nobody's taking line. Curtain went up. It was a set which everybody recognised of a Lang hut. You remember there were either Nissen huts or Lang huts.
Right.
And the Lang hut was a wooden sort of partition thing with strips of wood down and lockers over the beds. And there was a stove pouring smoke, which they did do. You couldn't light them till 5 o'clock at night anyway. and there was this terrible cast iron stove smoking away, and in the center locker was chalked, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here." And of course he got a big laugh. I mean, the set, the smoke, and the abandon hope. And then in comes Tone, the public school boy. Morgan, the Cockney recruit, is already lying on his bed, fast asleep. In comes Tone, chased in by I can't remember, and probably the sergeant, I imagine. And then eventually I arrive as Gregory, the Lancashire lorry driver. It's just hysterical. Well, anyway, it got very good notices. And lines that Dick Richards wrote in the Sunday Pictorial, wrote "Mirthquake." I mean, what a fantastic single-line quote, you know. And but they all enjoyed it. Top class and bottom class of newspapers, they all had a great time. And then in 1951, the Festival of Britain came. And the Festival of Britain actually destroyed much of the West End Theatre because people got the free South Bank to go to rather than come to pay money and see the theatre. But I luckily had a quarter of an hour, literally 15 minutes, broadcast on radio light programme, I suppose the light programme in those days, which was 50 minutes of the first scene.
Right.
But not visual, just sound. And it packed us out.
Really?
I mean, it just packed us out. People heard it and came to see us. Even though, and they went to see the Festival of Britain as well, but they came to see us, just up the road, really, you know. And then it was so successful, the BBC came back to me. Cecil Madden, who was the deputy controller of the BBC, well, it was only BBC, there was only BBC television in those days, the one station, and said, "Look, that sound was so successful, would you do an excerpt on telly?" And I said, "Well, is that all right?" And he said, "Well, it's just for us." And so the West End managers said, no way. And I thought, "Oh, sod this." And
the other West End managers.
The other West End managers.
They didn't want to do it.
And I did it. And of course, it was a vast success. I mean, it got an appreciation figure as big, if not bigger, than the Coronation later, the year later. Right. I mean, it was fantastic. And the queue was down Whitehall the next day. The phones in the box office started ringing that very night after the excerpt. And what we'd done is we'd done the show for the ordinary paying audience, and then we did the excerpt because they wouldn't allow the paying audience to see the show and pay for it. So it had to be free tickets for the actual telly. We did only the first act.
What time in the evening did you start the play?
Well, the Whitehall used to be 6 o'clock in the war.
Oh, really?
Oh, well, all the theatres.
Were they?
Yeah, yes. Because of bombing and blackout and that sort of thing. And the curtain used to go up at 6. And then they moved it to 7.
Right.
We moved it to 8 later on. But it was 7. And what we did is a train version, which you do on Saturday nights on tour, where you conflate the whole piece, including the intervals, and so as you catch the train to go home, you know. Yes. Yes, quite. But that's what we did. It was the train version. The intervals were cut down to 5 minutes, you know, so people only had time to rush out and come back again. And the cameras were already there. The BBC paid for the seats. They took up two.
Really?
They took up a box here and a box here, and the centre aisle up at the back there. There's 3 cameras. Right. And they pay for them, as though they were human beings. And then we got the curtain down by, well, I don't know, I suppose we got it down by just before 9 o'clock, and went up again at 9.
At 9:30?
No, this was the excerpt.
Yes.
It went up 9:15, something like that.
Yes.
And by 10 o'clock, it was over. 3/4 of an hour, the first act.
I see.
And that was it. I mean, from then on. So then the BBC came to me and said, "It's been a very big success. Would you like to do any more farces?" And I said, "Yes, I'd love to do." And they said, "Well, no, you can't do it on a Sunday. So I said, because the controller was a very religious man, and he believed that no fast should be seen on a Sunday.
Certainly not your underpants.
No, BBC fast. So we agreed to do it on a Thursday, and it was called Postman's Knock, and it was a fast by Philip King. See how they run, Philip King. And which had been on in the Rep, but never seen the light of day in the West End. So I agreed to do it, and we rehearsed this. Else was playing opposite me. And then she has a miscarriage and has to go into hospital. And luckily, the producer, the director, his wife had played the part in Rep. So she came in, and in 2 days rehearsal, we did the show. And now that was we played it again, did the train version of Reluctant Heroes, because again, we had to have rebuilt the set. And half an hour later, I finished with my face all blackened after the explosion at the end of Reluctant Heroes, rushed upstairs, cleaned up everything, put on a very smart suit and all the rest. Got made up by television, because in those days you had to have makeup on, sort of orange makeup. And meanwhile, the sets were struck for Reluctant Heroes, and a set was built for Postman's Knock. And half an hour after the curtain came down on Reluctant Heroes, curtain went up on Postman's Knock.
And this is on a Thursday night?
So Thursday
So it was
night.
going up about 9:30 again on...
Yeah,
on,
that's
on
right.
That's extraordinary. And was it...
90 minutes it was.
Right.
90 minutes.
So this was primarily, but not exclusively, presumably, the company from Reluctant Heroes again?
Lots of them.
With additions?
Yeah, lots of them. But
So you've now become a television producer?
Yeah, that's right.
So
And the BBC, it was so successful, the BBC came to me and said, would you like to do a series of farces? So I said, yes, but not on a Thursday. And they said, no, never on a Sunday. And this went on, this dialogue went on for about 2 years, 3 years.
So you didn't do them?
No, I didn't do them. And suddenly, ITV came along, Beat the Clock came along, and Sunday night at the Palladium, Tommy Trinder came along. The entire BBC audience, looking that sort of show, went and watched the ITV.
Yes.
So the BBC came to me and said, we've changed our minds.
Yes.
Would you do it on Sunday? And I went and I had lunch with the contract manager, BBC, lovely fella. Took me to lunch at a rather tatty Italian restaurant, Shepherd's Bush. And I walked out with a 3-year contract. And after that, I had a contract after that which lasted 21 years.
Good God. So and again, you had the company, the nucleus of your Whitehall Fast company, which was growing and developing and changing perhaps, and there were understudies like John Chapman who becoming writers and so on. And at the same time, you were adding to that company to do your television productions.
Yes, that's right.
And you were really building quite an empire there. And of course, the television productions were done as theatre productions.
They were done. They were 90 minutes. Mm-hmm. We had to cut them down, and I used to rehearse in front of the old age pensioners on Friday morning. We'd do a dress rehearsal with the scenery and everything, and time it, and then we'd do any extra cuts and things like that. I was always the bloke who did the cuts.
Right.
So I made sure that my lines were never cut. That's not true. No, not true. I was not a selfish
Did you have
actor.
to negotiate difficult cuts with authors who are saying, "Oh no, not that"?
No, not really. I mean, generally, some authors like Kenneth Horne, Love's Love in a Mist, Women Aren't Angels. No, Wolf's Clothing. I'm thinking of. I can't remember his other. I did all his plays, Ken Horne. He insisted on rewriting them for telly.
Oh, really? Did
I mean, cutting them down
himself?
For himself. And that was fine. But all the other authors let me do it, and
Yes.
Ben Travers included.
Really?
Yeah.
And
Although, no, Ben did rewrite one scene
yes.
for when I did, I can't remember which one it was.
So how many did you
Tons
do?
of Money, I think it was. Tons of Money. No, I didn't do Tons of Money. No, it wasn't Ben Travers. That wasn't Ben Travers.
That was Will Evans.
Will Evans, yeah. Will Evans and Valentine.
Yes. So how many did you do in all? How many years? 3 years, did you say?
No, I did 5 a year on average.
5 a year.
And they were on Sundays or bank holidays.
That's surely nearly one a month, isn't it?
No.
One every 2 months, yes.
Yeah. And I chose them, I cast them,
yes.
I cut them,
yes.
and I directed one, anyway, Reluctant Heroes, but normally it was directed by Wally Douglas,
yes.
who had 7 productions on in the West End at that time.
Really?
Yeah, 7. And I used Wally, I used Dickie Bird, Richard Bird, who generally fell fast asleep in rehearsals. Right. I used a fellow called Jack Williams, who did a great deal for he eventually became a television
Now these, of
director.
course, all went out live.
Absolutely.
So they are now lost to us.
Absolutely.
And, which is a great shame.
The BBC eventually started to record them, only for record purposes, really, with a camera stuck at the end of the cathode ray tube,
yes.
which was extraordinary. And you sort of got a white screen, sort of white mist around everything. But they did that. And then the thing called Ampex came along, and we started to record black and white Ampex,
right.
which is a great wide tape. And Ampex, the BBC chucked everything away after 2 years and recycled the Ampex tape. And they chucked away an Alan Bennett play, they chucked away Morecambe and Wise, they chucked away us.
Yes.
You know, everything we'd done, just thrown away. I mean, didn't bother to keep them in the archives. I mean, it's unbelievable,
It's a great shame. Now, so Reluctant Heroes did 4 years at the Whitehall.
Yes.
And you were looking, as well as getting involved with television, you were looking for what was going to come next.
Yes.
Because you were there at the Whitehall. They couldn't get rid of you unless you did something wrong.
And I knew there was a living to be made out of farce.
You discovered that.
Yeah.
Ever since your tights fell down,
Yeah.
I think.
And so I wanted to go on. And so I started to look for plays.
Yes.
I started to pay authors. I paid, to try.
Did you?
Write
You
things.
commissioned plays?
Commissioned things. Only one was any good at all, and that was no good in the end because the Lord Chamberlain changed it, and so it was no good. And that was called Tell It to the Marines, which the Pertwees wrote, Roland Pertwee and Michael Pertwee, Michael being John Pertwee's brother,
yes.
Roland being the father. And they wrote this farce, which was about Russia and about us occupying the same island as the Russians during the Cold War was on, and the troops agreeing with one another, this is ridiculous, and never firing shots at each other, firing over anything to not kill each other and have any real war. And they wouldn't let it happen. The Chamberlain wouldn't.
We're making fun of something serious.
And they said they couldn't have the Russians being shown at loggerheads with us during the Cold War, and that was it. And so, but the extraordinary thing is that my understudy, John Chapman, had come straight from RADA. He hadn't even finished a RADA. He'd come down, auditioned, and we'd given him the job as my understudy. And all he had to do was fall on with some kit and play a very small part of a Scottish soldier in the third act. So he had this great gap in the middle of the show. And so he, up in his dressing room, he started to write. And after 2 years, he came to me and said, can I leave, please? I didn't mind him leaving because he was only a small part.
Yes.
He said, I'd love to get some repertory experience. And he went down to Folkestone, to the Lees Pavilion, and he continued to write. Eventually, the play was Dry Rot.
Right.
He came back to me 2 years later and said, would you like to look at this play? And I looked at the play and I said, yes, but this is wrong and that's wrong and my part's not very good and this sort of thing, And he rewrote it again. Then we started to try it out, and they've tried out at Windsor, Richmond. And I don't
with a different company, because
different company,
you're still doing
pick-up companies.
Heroes.
And then I decided to do that. The play was still wrong. We had a 3-week tour before we brought it back to the Whitehall. And there was the great hole in the last act because it all took place on the race course. And there they were on stage in a hotel, you know, it is just a radio commentary. So we had to do something. We invented, I suggested it, and John wrote it, a tea where this awful bookmaker and his runner, Flash Harry, who had no real manners, sat down to this tea while this commentary was going on of the race. And of course their fortune was backed up on the commentary. And there they were having this polite tea being served to them, etc. And it really was a very funny scene. And it transformed the last act and made it possible. And then we came in, and the play ran for 4 years again.
So Reluctant Heroes had finished?
Well, no, Reluctant Heroes finished it could have gone on, but I got bored of it going on every night. 4 years. And I mean, no actor will do more than about 6 months now at the top weight. And then,
so then you were looking to another 4 years of dry rot.
Yeah. And well, this is of course in those days, actors got run of play contracts, not no 1 year.
No.
Run of play, that's it. You didn't mess around. Reluctant Heroes went on, and John went to earn money, and he married Betty Impey, who was in Reluctant Heroes, but and he'd met her there, of course. And they got married, and he ran around in a London taxi he bought a second-hand taxi for a bit, his first car, with his royalties. And then he started to write a second play, which was Simple Spyman, which I've always thought was the better of the two plays that I did. It was the Marx Brothers, really. It was a crazy piece of writing, but it was very funny, and we could put a lot of funny business into it. And that was Dry Rot, and as I say, that ran for 4 years as well. In Dry Rot, in the tour of Dry Rot, came another actor playing Flash Harry called Ray Cooney. And Ray Cooney went off on tour and met John Slater, who was playing his old part. By then, John had left the play. He'd taken on a national tour, fantastic business. He'd taken Reluctant Heroes on a national tour. At the end of Reluctant Heroes, we had a national tour. We had the end of it in London. We had a London theatre tour, separate tour.
Outer London?
Outer London, right. Doing all the nine outer London theatres.
God.
And we had a tour going in Germany as well, around the troops.
Were you acting as a manager of all of these?
Yeah, all of them.
So you were a West End manager.
Yeah.
You were a Outer London tour manager. You were a tour manager.
Yeah.
You were trying to find new plays that you were touring to bring in, and you were a television producer putting on a plethora of farces.
Well, I was just beginning to be a television producer. It didn't start till 1 year after Dry Rot.
Oh, I see, a bit later. But this was a hell of a lot of work for somebody who was also acting for every night.
In one play, in one production, Christmas 1956, I was in a filming at Pinewood. I was filming at Pinewood. I was filming, I was directing Reluctant Heroes for telly, and I was playing Dry Rot at nights.
Must be going mad.
Well, I was young.
Yes,
of course. We did things like that. And so anyway, during, as I say, during the Dry Rot run, of course, the television series really began. Yes. And in the end, I did about 75 full-length plays on telly. I had a series called Six of Rix. I had a series called Dial Rix. I had a series called Men of Affairs, and I had a series called A Roof Over My Head as well. So
you were a busy boy, and then. But now you said that you're going to get a bit bored doing 4 years of. Now, at some point in these proceedings, perhaps later, perhaps I'm jumping ahead. You tried to get into repertoire. Took another theatre, moved to the Garrick. Or
that's right.
Had it as well, and tried presumably to relieve what was after all, I wouldn't say tedium, I couldn't dream of saying that, but 4 years of the same play.
Well, I was beginning to lose actors.
Right.
Because they were having breakdowns. I mean,
Breakdowns?
Well, yeah, Larry Noble, I mean, I say a breakdown, he got desperate after 17 years, I think it was. He came to me and said, I've got to have a change, Brian. Of course, he became quite a well-known serious actor after he left us.
Right.
And Andy Sachs had started his life with us.
Yes.
And Ray Cooney, as I say, started his writing as well when he was playing a small part with us, and so it goes on.
There you were doing all these long runs at the Whitehall, doing the television.
That's the reason I originally split from the Whitehall. What happened was that, as I say, I had a non-breakable contract.
Yes.
As long as I stayed. But then I thought I'd love to try and do repertoire.
So how many plays in was this, though? Was this?
Oh, this was after 5 plays.
5 plays. What were they then at the Whitehall? Reluctant Heroes?
Well, the first one was Reluctant Heroes.
Of course.
Second one was Dry Rot. Simple Spine was 3. One for the Pot was 4, and Chase Me Comrade was 5.
Right.
The last one I did when I'd come back to the Whitehall was Fringe Benefits.
Right.
And so anyway, to begin with, I thought I'd like to try repertoire, and the Whitehall stage wasn't big enough. It was almost impossible. I mean, how we got the televisions on, I have no idea.
So you mean it wasn't big enough to accommodate more than one set, or to the technically?
More than one set, because it only had 11 foot on one side.
I see.
17 foot on the other, 11 foot on the other. I mean, that's no depth at all, is it?
Right.
It's ridiculous. And then it went under, you could go deeper, but it went under a very low roof, of which the pavement was above.
Right.
Of the Spring Gardens, the back of Whitehall. And also, I fell out with the theatre because I wanted to buy it, and they were going to sell it. And so I thought, well, I'm going to leave this theatre for a little bit and go elsewhere to the Garrick, who wanted me. Where it was a nice big stage and I could try the repertoire. And that meant that people could have breaks, people could change parts, it'd be a proper experience. And I decided to do it with 3 farces, and I recruited Derek Farr, I recruited Leslie Crowther, I kept on all the old ones, you know. Andy Sachs came in, and Leo Franklin was still there, of course, and Derek Royal was there, who was the most marvellous faller of all actors, and so on. And I brought in, with Peter Bridge, I brought in Daniel LaRue to the Whitehall in a musical,
right,
called, can't remember what it's called now. Anyway, it ran. But as long as we wanted it to run. The idea was that if I didn't enjoy the rep or whatever it is, we could come back to the Whitehall after Daniel LaRue finished. And it was quite an entertaining piece, the Whitehall. And off we went, and I had a holiday, for the real holiday, for the first time. But by then, I had introduced holidays. I was the first manager to introduce, well, desperation on my own part, really.
Yes.
I wanted to break as much as anyone else.
So you gave all your actors paid holidays in the course of the runs?
I did. What happened was this. I recruited originally good understudies. And then when the summer came, May came, I offered 3 actors or actresses the holiday together, and 3 understudies went on, played those parts for a fortnight. And they then came back, and then the next lot went off, and again they moved over. And in the meantime, I got understudies for the understudies, if you see what I mean, just for the summer break. And that lasted for, well, by the time I got everybody away, some 2 a week or 3 a week or a fortnight, I mean, myself, it maybe much as 14 weeks or something like that. The understudies had to play, and of course it was marvellous for them because they could be seen and heard and what have you. And it was marvellous for the actors, and I paid them, and that was it. And everyone was happy, except me, because I whenever I went away, either the author came in for me, John Chapman came in, or Ray Cooney came in, or something like that. Oh, once I put in Stanley Baxter, who was a big, huge success on the box. And he eventually took the play, it was Chase Me Comrade, he took the play to Australia, where it was successful. But he came in for me, and people didn't want to see him. It was extraordinary. I went away for a month thinking Stanley Baxter would be a huge success. And of course he wasn't. He wasn't a disaster, but the audience just didn't want to...
Well, it was so associated with you and the company.
That's right, and they were associated with him, with his television, you know, and so on, or up in Scotland. And so it didn't work out. But normally I didn't go for as long as a month, you know. I went away for a fortnight. And so everyone had a holiday. But two people didn't come with me to the Garrick. One was my own brother-in-law, Peter Mercier, and the other was Larry Noble, because both of them said they couldn't go on anymore.
They wanted a real break.
Wanted a real break. So we went to the Garrick, and I hadn't enough money to tell everybody what was happening. People thought the play was on for a short run, and then a new play was on. They didn't realize that the old play was coming back, and with a different actor playing the part. For instance, I would be playing the lead in Stand By a Bedouin this week. 3 weeks later, the part would be played by Leslie Crowther.
Oh, really?
You see what I mean? So we were mixing.
Well, you really had the actors.
Oh yes, I had the actors changing as well.
Well, like a ballet company.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was there was a fresh look all the time, and I split on Thursdays, meaning that you got two productions in a week. But I hadn't enough money to tell people what happened, and it was quite clear that the last play I put on, which was Let Sleeping Wives Lie, which was Harold Brooke and Kay Bannerman, who wrote She Wrote The Admiral's Daughter, which Richard Wilson was talking about this morning. Yes. That play was big success because everybody was in that play at that particular time. In other words, Leslie was in the play, Derek Farr was in the play, Elspeth was in the play, Andy Sachs was in the play, I was in the play. You see what I mean? It was it was the best known bunch of actors together in that one play. So that was clearly going to run. So Stand By Bedouin was the least successful, and that was Ray Cooney and Tony Hilton. And Uproar in the House was pretty successful, but written by the same people who wrote No Sex, Please for British.
Oh, right.
This was an earlier play. And that transferred to the Whitehall, and that moved to the Whitehall, with Nicholas Parsons playing my part. And that's how we sort of finished, I'm afraid, after 6 months of trying to run the repertory. And it was a brilliant idea, different sorts of plays, all farces, of course, mixing up the actors. I thought it was great, but I hadn't got enough money to let people know what exactly was happening.
Yes, it's always a problem with repertoire.
Yeah, of course.
But you were functioning really like the Moscow Art Theatre or the Berliner Ensemble. This is like the not a long West End run, but a company sharing roles in repertoire. Yeah. This is what major serious companies do, and here you were doing it, as it were, out of Whitehall farces. You were also a new writing theatre in a way.
Yes, absolutely. Well, new writers, we got the writers who were spawned by the Whitehall. There was Colin Morris, who wrote Reluctant Heroes, became a very, very serious documentary writer for the BBC, won lots and lots of awards. And also he wrote a 4-part series called Jackson Knaves, which was about the police in Liverpool. And that became Z-Cars, and they turned into Z-Cars. Reluctant Heroes inadvertently became the Army Game with Bernie Bresslaw and...
Did Colin Morris write that?
No. What happened was that towards the end of the run of Reluctant Heroes, there was a producer-director for ATV, who were then the Birmingham television company, came along to my dressing room and said, I'd very much like to do an army series. And I said, well, don't ask me, ask Colin Morris. So I took him down the corridor to Colin. And Colin said, no, I'm not going to do any more farces. I'm going to the BBC to write my serious documentaries, etc. So he said, oh, well, that's a very pity. And he went away, and Army Game was the result. He got Tolly Rothwell to write the Army Game, Talbot Rothwell. And Berda Breslaw, translated into a big, large Cockney, was playing what was my part, really. Gregory was a slow-thinking Lancastrian.
Right.
So, I mean, both, I mean, it's extraordinary how it mirrored. Alfie Bass was in it, Mickey Medwin, and so on. Well, they were playing really characters derived from Reluctant Heroes.
Yes.
So we had nothing to do with that, but it sort of spawned it,
you spawned
as it were.
it, yes.
So we had Colin, who became the serious writer. Then there was then there was John Chapman first, Ray Cooney. Then somebody will surprise you, an actor called Clive Brooke. He changed his name to Clive Exton.
Right.
He played in Reluctant Heroes, and Clive Exton, of course, became a very, very well-known
television writer.
Many things, all the Poirots and things like that. We had another one called Philip Levine, who took over from George Radford as a medical orderly in Reluctant Heroes. He started to write all the first Avengers. Then we had an actor called Andrew Broughton. He went to become a children's producer, and he wrote things, children's books as well, children's televisions as well. And
Tony Hilton was one?
Tony Hilton, of course. Tony Hilton with Ray Cooney.
Yes, yes.
So, I mean, they all became writers, except for Colin. They all became writers because they had time on their hands, playing small parts and long runs.
Yes.
And nothing else to do.
Yes.
And so they all wrote.
Yes.
And they all became, in their own ways, very successful.
Yes.
Extraordinary, isn't it?
It is, yes, yeah. and it's a you know a side effect of the Whitehall farces, of which we don't perhaps are not aware of.
Well, anyway, what happened then was that I, after the Les Sleeping Wives lie, they decided to sell the theatre at long last.
The Whitehall.
But they didn't offer it to me. They offered it to
Paul Raymond.
Paul Raymond. And Paul Raymond bought it and put on pyjama tops and funny farces like that, which are not really my idea of farce.
Different bits of clothing were coming off.
Indeed. And that's what happened to the Whitehall. And eventually, as you know, it was listed. I was there for the listing of the theatre as an Art Deco theatre. And all that's covered now, because it's now the Trafalgar Studios, but only temporarily. I mean, it's got to be restored as a theatre. Oh, yes. I mean, it's a listed theatre.
Yes.
It's the Art Deco, which is covered up. And you now have the Stalls, which is a small studio, and the Circle, which is a large studio, and all the Art Deco, which was all over the proscenium arch and to the side of the proscenium, all that's been covered up with paneling.
But it's got to be restored.
But it's got to be restored eventually. Well, I mean, you know, I don't know when. I shan't be alive to see it. But there we are.
There's a wonderful quote about your work from Ronald Brydon, who became the drama critic for the Observer, but he wrote this in the New Statesman. Do you want to read it, or shall I read it?
You read it.
Your
voice is better than mine.
Well, it just raises an interesting, I mean, putting you into a different context, which I think is what has been interesting for me, thinking about you and reading about you. That it says, this quote says...
May I say that Harold Hobson in the Sunday Times was writing the same sort of thing?
He was consistently supportive of your
work,
yes. This says, there they are, the most robust survivors of a great tradition, the most successful British theatrical enterprises of our time. Curious that no one can be found to speak up wholeheartedly for them. No one, that is, outside enthusiastic millions who have packed every British theatre where they have played. It is particularly curious considering the current intellectual agitation for a theatre of the masses, a true working-class drama. Everything, apparently, for which Joan Littlewood has struggled, the boisterous extrovert playing, the integrated teamwork, the Cockney irreverence of any unself-conscious, unacademic audience bent purely on pleasure, exists patently and profitably at the Whitehall. Yet how many devout pilgrims to Stratford East have hazarded the short journey to Trafalgar Square to worship at the effortless shrine of the thing itself? How many Arts Council grants have sustained Mr. Rix's company? How many Evening Standard awards went to dry rot? How many theses have been written on the art of Colin Morris, John Chapman, or Ray Cooney? The time has come, surely, to fill the gap. So it's interesting that putting you into a context of saying this is, in a way, serious theatre.
Well, we got it's marvellous that, the quote. I was very proud of that, of course. But what was interesting is that, I mean, most of the serious critics wrote about us like that.
Yeah,
J.C. Truin, do you remember? Old J.C. Truin, he wrote about that. The bloke with the double barrel name in The Guardian, too.
Philip Hope Wallace.
Philip Hope Wallace. Of course, it was just one of those things. The only high-class critic who never could bear me, was Ken Tynan.
Oh, could he not?
Well, he wrote. I mean, when I say he couldn't bear me, dry rot. His notice for dry rot was, you always remember your bad notices.
Yes, you do.
His notice for dry rot was a play about horses fit for donkeys.
Oh, really? Yes.
But you see, he was just writing a clever.
Yes.
You know, he didn't care, and he knew. And anyway, the theatre was packed. I didn't care what Ken Tynan said. No. Anyone else? Actually, I didn't care what anyone said. But I was bloody glad they were saying it. Yes. The good ones.
Did you ever think, in any point in your career, that should I move into what other people might think a more serious theatre, so that Kenneth Tynan would approve of what you were doing? Did you ever think of why don't I try Ibsen? Why don't?
Well, I thought of it probably in my waking hours, about 4 o'clock in the morning. I might think about it,
but not for long.
Well, no, because I knew nobody would take it seriously.
I mean, once you'd established your style.
I'm jumping right ahead now.
Yeah.
But when I went to MenCap eventually, I'd worked for MenCap as a chairman of their finance committee, their fundraising committee, way back in the 50s, 60s. And I'd held my meetings on stage at the Whitehall Theatre, things like that. And I'd been, I had a CBE already for my work for learning disability. And eventually, as I say, I applied for the job as Secretary General, now Chief Executive of MenCap. And they turned me down originally as not being as suitable because I dropped my trousers for a living. I mean, because I created the wrong image. I mean, that's the sort of thing that stuck with me. Yeah. And it still sticks with me today. I'm 88, and I'll guarantee if I go to somebody who recognises me, they'll say, glad you got your trousers on, or whatever they say. It happens all the time.
I do have this image that when you might have stood up to make your first speech in the House of Lords, but your trousers should have descended, but they presumably didn't.
No, they didn't.
But you're not the only person to suffer in this way. I mean, Alan Ayckbourn is a wonderful playwright, but there are people who have an idea of what he is, who probably haven't ever read or seen a play of his, but you can be thought of as a light boulevardier, and in fact his plays are often deeply serious and worthy of being, of course, as spoken of in conjunction with anybody else's work, but people have their prejudices and misconceived preconceptions quite often.
Well, I don't know whether you read, I put together a book, which I wrote most of it, called Life in the Fast Lane.
Oh, I've got it.
Well, Life in the Fast Lane is sort of academic work, really, of the history of farce, in really stretching back. But I got various farce writers to write short pieces for me, including Alan Ayckbourn, and there he says the most difficult form of writing is to get laughs, etc.
Now, what is farce? Can you define it, or is it definable?
Well, I called it in Life in the Fast Lane, the tragedy with his trousers down. What was that? Another one. Was it? But it is tragedy with his trousers down, because you've got to have a believable story. You've got to have actors who believe in what they're saying. There are very few modern actors do farce because they don't believe in it. They don't believe in the character, or they don't believe this sort of thing. So they're inclined to stand on centre stage and shout. And that's not in your productions, I hasten to add.
I hope not.
No.
Yes.
But I mean, I've seen some pretty ropey productions.
Of farce.
Of farce.
Where people were striving to be funny, perhaps.
That's right. I mean, they did one which was directed by Alan Ayckbourn. They did one at the National Theatre called Tons of Money, which was never a very good play, as you know.
Yes.
But it was the first play
Yes.
that they did at the Aldrich team did outside the Aldrich Theatre. They started life at the Duke of York's, and then the Aldrich. Then they moved to the Aldrich. Then they did It Pays to Advertise, which was an American play.
Yes.
But Tons of Money was actually 3 music hall sketches.
Right.
And when the National did it, it came over as 3 music hall sketches, except for the beginning of the second act, where Michael Gambon
Yes.
and Diana Bull,
Yes.
who died unhappily,
Yes.
played the butler and the maid. And they were hysterical, absolutely hysterical. And I thought, oh God, if only all the other actors could, and also the lines could be as good as this. The rest of Tons of Money on either side was rubbish, really, but they were brilliant. But don't forget, Gambon is a
Serious actor.
A serious actor,
Yeah.
but he's also a marvelous farce actor, because he's a good actor. To be a good farce actor, you've got to be a good actor.
Yes.
You've got to believe. You've got to make the audience believe that the character you're playing is indeed a live character, not a cardboard piece of,
Yes.
you know. And farce is probably the most difficult form of theatre to do properly and to really achieve the laughs you want. I'm certain that I mean, I couldn't do it anymore. Let's put it that way. Old age. You got physically. You've got
tiring
to be,
stuff.
Physically, you've got to be 100%.
The problem with it for a director or actors is that you either get it right or you get it wrong. It's like a piece of maths. At this point, we either totally accept the world of the play and that it is essential for this man to be doing this at this point, or his wife will discover X or Y, and we find this funny. If we don't find it funny, we're not going to find it vaguely interesting. I mean, you don't have, as many people have said, an interesting production of a farce. You either have a funny one or you have a non-funny one. Chekhov, of course, if you see even a mediocre, well, he does write good farce, but if you see a mediocre production of a Chekhov, one of his great plays, you'll get something from it, but you won't get anything from a farce that isn't making you laugh, of course. The other thing that it seems that we struggle with is that we can't believe anything serious is being said if we're laughing. I mean, I think that's something that perhaps Alan Ayckbourn suffers from. He's saying often serious things, but he's making us laugh while we're watching them, and we think, oh, well, he can't be writing something as really serious because we're laughing. We expect serious things to be said in plays where we don't laugh.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. I think you've described it better than me, really.
Oh, really? Well,
but I mean, it is, and of course the snag is that farce is denigrated because it's used as a word of denigration, really. Yes. I mean, the government's a farce, or the health service is being changed. You know, it's used as a means of putting down. Yes. And it sort of carries on to farce actors. Yes. And yet, some of the farce actors, I mean, Andy Sachs, beautiful farce actor, but he'd be equally good, but people can only think of him now as Manuel in Fawlty Towers.
Well, Fawlty Towers is a very good example because
they were farces.
Of course they were. They were wonderful farces. And what is, I mean, it's an acting lesson watching Fawlty Towers. I mean, it's not a only a fast lesson, but watching John Cleese play that part to the hilt, and never for 1 minute does he. You often get actors, I find it interesting, actors say, well, I think we should show some, you know, we've been married a long time, we should show some warmth, how we were ever attracted to each other. And I think, no, I don't want this, not in the play.
That's right.
You know,
quite right.
You watch Basil and Sybil, and not for 1 minute does he show you why they ever got married in the first place. And if he did have a little tender scene, you'd think, oh my God, it's destroyed.
Absolutely right. Yeah. Do you know John Cleese wrote his first play for us?
Did he really?
Well, not play. It was radio. He was BBC trainee writer or producer or something.
Yes.
And we were doing a series. Well, no, it was the beginning of a series. And he wrote a thing called You'll Be Surprised. It was about Christmas.
Right.
Yule, Y-U-L-E. Which he's deeply ashamed now.
Oh, I was going to say, can I have it? Have you got the
Which is a pity, because actually it was quite funny. And there he was, this very tall young man. And there I was with Terry Scott and Elspeth reading his script.
Right.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
And another performance that I cite sometimes from the television is Warren Mitchell in Till Death Us Do Part, which was a great comic performance, I thought. But the man is very real and, in fact, very angry and passionate in the same way that Cleese was in different way in Fawlty Towers. They playing their part to the hilt, and only because they play it to the hilt do we find it funny.
Well, I mean, Leo Franklin is a classic example. I mean, he played the rude Cockney as a rude Cockney. I mean, he was just too generally Cockney, or posh Cockney, or you know, whatever he was playing. But I mean, to work with Leo was a joy. He just knew how to get laughs. Even as an old man, he used to get laughs. I never forget one in Simple Spiderman. In Simple Spiderman, there was. Oh God! It was a funny sequence. We were street musicians, actually. We were taken on by MI5. They thought we were MI5 agents, and we had to don a lot of disguises. And at one stage, he's dressed as a vicar with all the accoutrements on, and I'm up a chimney. And the fire's been lit, and he comes on and sees this, and he's, oh God, and of course then there's people around there, and he turns it into, oh God, help it, and does. It was brilliantly done. And then he turned round to them and said, so 3 verses of Oli, 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 and push off home, and got and pushed everyone out of the. I mean, it sounds nonsense now. But when he did it, the audience wet themselves. It was so funny.
Things matter terribly in Fast. It's terribly important that the things that are going on. If anybody takes the brakes off, wants to underplay something, it'll just disappear. I mean, they are life and death situations normally, aren't they?
Well, I tell you, the very funny thing, in Reluctant Heroes, I had to close order march. Which, if you remember, is marching sideways.
Oh right. Yes.
Close order march, marching sideways.
I never did national service. I'm afraid.
I close ordered marched the wrong way, and I marched off to the left and put my foot in a bucket. I put my foot in a bucket. The author hated it from that moment on.
Oh, did he?
Colin did. Yes, they thought it couldn't possibly. The audience fell about and laughed because I couldn't get rid of the bloody thing.
Yeah.
And it was, and of course, you know, once you've got them laughing, it's what you can do is then amazing. And so, but they've got to fully understand that you could put your foot in the bucket.
Oh yes.
You haven't done it to get the laugh.
No.
You have been doing this, and you've unconsciously.
Yes. Yes, if anything's contrived, it'll be seen, it'll be noticed.
That's right.
In it. And it'll also crack up everything else that follows. I mean, I think once something But once you stop believing in the situation, you can see fast, you're going along with it, and if you think, oh, no, I don't believe that.
But that's what I could never believe about myself, because I look back now at the business I invented, and I was great with the things like foot in buckets and two sweaters too big, or getting into somebody else's coat, or whatever, all these sort of things. I was good at all these. And now I look back and I think, how the hell did I?
Yes, where did it come from? Was there an
where
influence?
did it come from? How did I do it? And
but was there an inspiration behind it?
Yeah, I just did it. I mean, I did it.
There wasn't anybody you saw doing things on film or in theatre?
No, but I told you the other day, I was talking to you about the putting of the jacket on, upside down and all the rest of it, and inside out, then jacket being onto... This was with Leo Franklin.
Yes. And
the ending up as the vicar saying, "Thou art indeed a bloody fool, my son."
Yes.
And with the coat on back to front.
Yes.
And so on. Well, that I thought was absolutely unique. I thought I'd invented that. I fell down the stairs at bad matinee at Dry Rot, the end of the run. I did it as a bit of a joke with Leo. And we moved it into Simple Spyman as part of the play. And years later, I saw an excerpt of a film, in fact, I think I showed it, of Lupino Lane doing exactly the same business in, nearly the same business, in Lambeth Walk, in Lambeth, in the film.
Yes.
I couldn't, there I was, so proud of the business I'd invented. There's nothing new in the world.
Yes.
He'd been doing it 20 years before.
Yes.
But I'd never seen it.
No.
It's just one of those things.
Did you go, when you were young, did you go and watch comics, or did you go and watch?
No.
You didn't?
No.
No.
No, I mean, I used to go to the theatre with my mum, because my mum was a great theatre girl.
Yes.
And I used to play in plays, but apart from that, no, I didn't.
Do you think your work has had an influence on other people?
Oh, yes. I mean, a lot of directors, actors, say they got their enthusiasm for the theatre from watching, most of them from watching the telly. They realised it could be great fun. You know, they thought, oh, I'd love to do that as a, not necessarily act, but I'd like to be involved in the theatre. I mean, well, I think you've got a list, haven't you, of people?
I think
Terry Hands
Richard
was
Eyre,
one.
Terry Hands.
Richard Eyre,
David Thacker.
David Thacker.
Yes.
You know, all say that they enjoyed the
Well,
theatre.
and if you were living somewhere where it wasn't easy to have access to a theatre, then your theatre performances on the television were theatre performances, and therefore that was a first taste, perhaps, for some people.
Well, we tried to not shout, to project too much. Of course, the voices are slightly louder, bound to be, because we had an audience. But we had a PA system as well when we were recording the farces. So the audience had a PA system out front. The microphones they were draped all over the stage.
Yes.
A bit like the House of Lords.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen them in the House of Lords? Well, no, probably the House of Commons is the same. They're very thin little microphones projecting on the seat, to every seat. Well, we had those sort of things hanging off a bar.
Well, you have to have an audience for a farce, don't you? I mean, that's why hence sitcoms on television being done with studio audiences. And if you try to put farce on film, I mean, it doesn't work. It's not the sort of farce you and I have been talking about. Obviously, you can have Chaplin and Keeson and Jacques Tati doing a different kind of farce, but the farces that you did, if filmed, did they work?
Two. One was hugely successful. That was Reluctant Heroes.
Oh, was it?
Well, that was filmed literally a year after it opened in London. London went on for 3 more years, and the film came out. There's a good story there, because the reason I got my part in the film, they were originally going to Wally Patch's part was offered to Ronnie Shiner, which he took. Ronnie Shiner was then playing Seagulls Over Sorrento at in Shaftesbury Avenue, and Derek Farr took over from Dermot Walsh in the film. Larry Noble kept his part, and I kept my part, but only by accident, because it was Christmas Day, not Christmas Day in the workhouse. It was Christmas Day, 1950. It was our first Christmas. We put on lots of extra matinees. In fact, I think we did 3 shows on Boxing Day. I'm not sure we didn't do, but certainly we did with Dry Rot. I remember that. But we did the shows, and I got a bad cold, and you could hear any time I get anything on my chest or cold, I begin to lose my voice, and I'd lost my voice on the Friday matinee, and it wasn't a very good matinee, so they said, take the matinee off. And John Chapman was thrown on, literally, at a sort of an hour's notice. And George Formby was in front to see the part, to take over for the part in the film from me. It was going to be Ronnie Shine and George Formby, Derek Farr, and so on. At the end of the show, he said, "Oh, I'm not playing that part, doesn't get any laughs." And poor old John had struggled through, never having had even a proper rehearsal, and hadn't been all that funny. And he turned the job down, so they offered it to me. And I got my first 600 quid I got for that, and that bought our first flat in Holland Park.
So thanks to John Chapman.
Thanks to John Chapman, not being frightfully good.
Did George Formby ever act in the theatre? He must have done it as a young man, but I mean, we think of him as a film actor.
I don't think he ever acted, no. Yeah. Films, yes. And of course,
yes, but
Blackpool.
Not in, yes, you know, but not in play.
But no.
But here's all this work, and then in 1977, roughly speaking, I think you gave your final performance and retired almost.
It was January the 8th, 1977. Fringe benefits at the Whitehall Theatre.
Yeah, but actors don't retire, Brian. Why?
Well, I didn't retire, but I'd got bored with what I was doing, and I knew if I was bored, the audience would be bored very soon.
Right.
And I thought I couldn't really think of anything else original to do, you know. Nobody was producing me any original work for me.
Right.
And I'd dreamt up one play which was very funny, but wasn't a huge success, and so on. So I began to think, well, maybe I ought to think of theatre management, and
which you've been doing, of
which
course.
I've been doing,
yes.
but I mean pure theatre management. So I joined Ray Cooney and Laurie Marsh for a short time in their company, and I ran the theatres in London and one on Broadway, which we opened.
But you also, of course, went to the Arts Council.
Oh, yes.
There you were from the commercial theatre, going to work for the organisation that supported people like me who work in the subsidised theatre.
Well, what happened was that Luke Rittner was the director of the Arts Council, and of course his feet were slightly more plebeian than the average Arts Council director. I mean, he hadn't come from the echelons of
power
of academia. You know, he was very much from the ordinary hoi polloi, and he'd become, and he thought of me as a drama chairman, and he asked me if I'd do it, and it was literally, I knew I'd got a knighthood by then, but it was quite useful. I'd got a knighthood coming up in 1986, and I accepted. It was greeted with slight amount of disbelief by one or two members of the press, and then I had to find, or rather I had to agree to the appointment of a director, and I'm happy to say that Professor Ian Brown, who is now responsible for these entire interviews, was my appointed director. He was marvellous, and Ian really kept the, I mean, it was like having, I mean, I took a lot of the credit for, or demerits for the work he did. And so we were a very good pair for nearly 8 years.
Did you enjoy it?
Oh yeah, it was hard work though. I mean, you went to the theatre maybe 3 times a week, 4 times a week. You went to the Edinburgh Festival, you saw 14, 15 shows, and you wrote reports about the lot. I mean, I wrote them as sort of notices, really. quite fun. And but Ian had to take all the real brickbats and things like that because we tried to shift money around. I mean, the West Yorkshire Playhouse would not have existed without Ian and me. We found £1 million to get them off the ground.
Right.
Which, of course, was unheard of in those days.
And it wasn't an easy time to be.
No, it wasn't. We were being cut a lot of the time. We had some very strange arts ministers as well, who weren't necessarily very supportive.
But coming as you did from the commercial side of life in the theatre, when you had to find your own money, make your own money, was there a kind of culture shock of moving into the subsidised sector where you were getting money from the government? I mean, it was the mindset. Did you find it different, or was it easy?
I found a certain amount of greed among people who wanted subsidies, in as much that the National Theatre and the RSC always wanted more if they could possibly get it. And we always wanted more for the regions. You know, we tried to keep up regional theatre.
Yes, of course.
So there was a certain amount of argument between us and the National and the RSC, but which I suppose is inevitable. I mean, but they did spend an awful lot of money. No, I never felt bitter about this. I might have done if I'd still been doing it, but by then I wasn't.
Yes, no. Are you glad you've almost, I don't know, 2 careers is understating it in a way, but having had your theatrical career and now, well, Arts Council, but MENCAP in particular, and now being in the House of Lords, you've managed to put into one life sort of 3 or 4 of them.
Yes.
That must have been enjoyable. Is that have you
Oh,
enjoyed?
fantastic. I've loved life. I should be very angry when I die.
Now, having had this very busy, active life, is there anything, perhaps this should be my final question, is there anything that you haven't done that you would like to have done? Or done differently?
I probably would like, when I was young, to have played Hamlet, yes.
To have played Hamlet?
Yes, I think I would have done.
So there's a little bit of it in you which would have liked to have been a serious actor?
Oh yes, oh yes. I started life thinking I was going to be a serious actor.
Yes.
That's why I went to, you know, I was fortunate to go to Wolford.
Yes, and certain things happened that led you into the farce field.
And then I never gave it another thought.
No.
But basically, when I went in, I was good looking, I had a lot of black hair, I was, you know...
Yes. Hamlet was waiting.
Hamlet was waiting. I would have been perfect at
but
20.
He never got to you.
But I never played it. But I tell you what I did do once. In a green room rag, I shouldn't mention what the play was, we did the banquet scene from a certain Scottish play.
Yes.
And I played the Scottish part.
Right.
And they put a whoopee cushion underneath my chair. That was part of the green room rag. And as I sat down, what is that moves, my lord? And these are the sort of lines that went on. And it was a terrible amalgam of several Shakespearean plays which we ran together for the green room rag. So I have played one major for 10 minutes.
But with a whoopee cushion.
With a whoopee cushion.
That somehow, I think, seems to sum it up.
Tragedy with his trousers down.